Hello everyone, my name is Abhishek and welcome back to my channel. Today is day 12 of AWS Zero to Hero series, and from this video to the next 4 videos, we will be learning about a new concept on AWS, that is how to implement CI/CD on AWS. Yes, you heard it right. We will take 4 complete episodes to learn about AWS services that helps us to implement CI/CD on AWS. So we will not be using Jenkins, we will not be using any other open source or available CI/CD solutions, but we will use the AWS managed services to implement CI/CD on AWS. So this is going to be really interesting, but today's video is dedicated to only one service, that is AWS CodeCommit. Okay, let's go on to the video and understand it in a better way. Now, what do I mean by using AWS services to implement CI/CD on AWS? First of all, let's try to understand that. So usually in our previous classes on when we were learning CI/CD, you know that you use solutions like Jenkins, or you use Argo CD, or you use GitHub Actions, you use GitLab CI or GitLab CD to implement the CI/CD solution on AWS or any other platform, right? Whether you're using on premises or you can use cloud provider platforms, you use these tools to implement CI/CD solution. But AWS also has their set of managed services such as AWS CodeCommit, you have AWS Code Pipeline, you have AWS Code Build, and AWS Code Deploy. So using these 4 services, you can implement the entire CI/CD process within AWS and by AWS, right? I'll explain you so that you understand it in a very simple way. Let's take example of Jenkins, as most of us understand Jenkins, right? Many DevOps engineers know about Jenkins. So let me simply explain this entire workflow using Jenkins, and then let me correlate them with AWS services. For example, you have a application that you want to deploy on Kubernetes. Let's take this example. Or you want to deploy it on EC2 and you use Jenkins as your orchestrator. So what you usually do is, firstly, you need to have a place where your code is hosted, right? What is the first step? You need to have a place where your code is hosted. Let's say GitHub. Then when someone commits the code to GitHub, this GitHub triggers a webhook and it triggers the Jenkins pipeline. So what is step 2? You have Jenkins pipeline. Then you have step 3. Within the pipeline, you have build process, right? You have building of application, unit testing, static code analysis, etc., etc. And finally, fourth step is you take this built product, it can be a Docker image, and deploy it onto Kubernetes or EC2 instance. These are the 4 steps, right? So for these 4 steps, we are using 4 tools. One is we are using GitHub for hosting the code. We are using Jenkins as an orchestrator and for the pipeline. Then we have for the build process, let's say you are using Docker or you are using anything, right? Or you're using something like SonarQube for integrations, multiple things. For build, you might be using Maven if it is a Java application. That is step 3. And step 4, you are using Argo CD or Shell script or Ansible for deploying the application onto EC2 or Kubernetes. So what AWS said is, instead of using these 4 tools, which are pretty much open source in my case where I explained, but they can be enterprise things as well. AWS said is, okay, I'll come up with my own services to implement this and exact same thing. For version control system, for hosting your code, instead of using GitHub, AWS says that you can use CodeCommit. For building, or for the Jenkins pipeline which we are using, you can use AWS Code Pipeline. For building the application, like you are using Maven or you are using the Jenkins system itself, instead you can use the AWS Code Build. And finally, instead of using Argo CD or shell scripts or something, you can use Code Deploy. Of course, whatever I said might not be the exact correlation, but for explaining you or for making you people understand, I have taken some liberty. But when I explain each of these concepts in the next 4 videos, you will definitely be able to understand, and you will definitely relate yourself with your Jenkins orchestrator or any other orchestrator if you are aware of it. And by end of these 4 classes, you will also learn how to implement an end-to-end CI/CD pipeline on AWS, right? Let's say you are new to CI/CD and you don't understand the concept of CI/CD itself. Don't worry, there is a very elaborated playlist on my channel. This is the playlist. You can go to my channel, you can switch to the playlist section and search for the CICD playlist, and you have 10 videos. Using this 10 videos, you can master the concept of CI/CD. You will learn what is CI/CD. You will use Jenkins. You will understand how to implement Jenkins, configure, setup. You will learn about the CI/CD process in depth. You will implement an ultimate CI/CD pipeline and interview questions. You will learn about GitHub Actions, GitLab. Everything is available within this specific repository. So you can go through this repository if you don't have knowledge of CI/CD or you haven't implemented CI/CD before. It is very required to go through these things because for DevOps engineers, CI/CD is the top priority. Okay, now, and I'll put the link in the description as well. So let's go back. And like I told you, today's video is only dedicated to AWS CodeCommit. We will have 4 classes, but today's class we will learn what is CodeCommit. Like I explained you, it solves the problem of version control system. But what is the problem? You have GitHub, you have GitLab, so we will learn about that and why AWS CodeCommit, why AWS did start this service. We'll learn about it. We will talk about advantages, disadvantages of AWS CodeCommit as well, and then I'll show you a practical demonstration of how to use this CodeCommit. And you will learn, like for example, how to access this code commit from your terminal, how to push files, how to read files, how does the entire workflow work. We'll learn about all of these things. And please watch this video till the end so that you can also practice it along with me. Cool. Now, what are the advantages, right? So before understanding advantages, I hope you understood what is code commit. Just one revision before I go ahead with the advantages. That is, AWS code commit is something very similar to GitHub or GitLab, right? You can compare it with them, but the only thing is that this is a managed AWS service. Now, why AWS did implement this managed service? You might ask me that, Abhishek, today I can go to GitHub, create an account, and I can start using GitHub. So simple. Why you need it? But we are using GitHub as our personal projects, for storing our personal projects or for using any open source projects and for contributing to open source projects. But when you work in an organization, you don't use a public GitHub repository. Either you use GitHub and create private repositories within it, or you basically implement your own Git solution. For example, a lot of organizations, what they do is they take the GitLab and they install GitLab on their servers. Or GitHub also has an enterprise solution, so people also go with GitHub Enterprise. So what AWS said is, if you want to take GitLab, right? I'm not saying organizations don't use GitHub. Organizations use GitHub, but mostly they use the private repositories, and many organizations also use hosted Git solutions. Like either they use GitLab, they download the GitLab package and they install GitLab on their own servers. It can be EC2 instances or it can be on-premises servers. And that is how most of the organizations use. So what AWS said is, okay, instead of you downloading GitLab and installing it on your own servers, and whenever it is required, you have to scale up these servers, you have to install GitLab on more number of servers. What AWS said is, don't worry, like every solution that we are offering, we will come up with a managed service for this solution as well. Like when AWS saw the problem of compute, they came up with EC2 instance. When they saw the problem of storage, they came up with S3 buckets. When they saw the problem with DNS, they came up with Route 53. Similarly, when they saw this problem that a lot of people are installing the packages such as self-hosted Git repositories, so don't worry, we will come up with a managed Git service. What is code pipeline? It's a managed Git service, and this service has the following advantages. One, it is managed Git. Second, the scalability. Tomorrow, if you want to, like previously you were only 100 developers and you only have, let's say, some 1 million lines of code, you have 20 applications, 30 applications. Now as the team grows, your organization grows, and number of application grows, you know what you have done is you have increased this managed Git servers from 10 to 20, right? So what happens is you have to again create this 10 EC2 instances, or you have to manage this 10 EC2 instances, constantly patch them, secure them. AWS said, don't worry, if you are using my service, then we will take care of the scalability. You can keep creating repositories. Now you have one repository, no problem. Tomorrow you have 10, you have 100, 200, 10,000. Only thing is you have to pay for us for using the services, right? If you want to use 1,000 repositories with AWS CodeCommit, this is the pricing, and you can create 1,000 repositories. Again, I'm repeating, you might be thinking that on GitHub, I'm creating these repositories for free, but let me tell you, in organization, no one use free GitHub repositories unless your code is open source. Like in my case, the organization that I'm working, mostly the code is open source, so I use GitHub. But in most of the organizations, the code is not open source, so the code is stored in GitLab servers, or the code private GitLab servers, or the code is stored in GitHub Enterprise, or people use their managed Git. That means they download Git and they install Git on their servers. In such cases, as the number of repositories increase, you also have to increase the capacity of your servers where you have installed Git. So AWS CodeCommit solves that problem as well, and it is definitely reliable because AWS is managing it. So if you have any issues with AWS CodeCommit, you know that you can talk to AWS, and there is an SLA agreement that you can also approach them and see what is the reliability. Of course, there are disadvantages as well, but before going on to disadvantage, let me show you how to use this code commit, how to create repositories in it, how to use the features of it, and then I'll go back and explain you the disadvantages. Of course, there are many disadvantages, and it is very, very important for you to look into the disadvantages section. So please watch the video till the end. I'll complete the demo and I'll come back here. Cool. Now let me go to my AWS console, right? And let me explain you from the practical point of view. So firstly, you should start with the root account for this demonstration. Of course, once we move ahead, we will use an IAM user. Root account will not be suitable for this demo. I'll tell you why. AWS code commit does not work well with the root account. There are some restrictions with respect to accessing them, with respect to SSH and HTTPS. So we will switch our gears towards IAM. But first of all, we need to be on the root account, because I'll show you how to create this IAM account and what permissions have to be granted to the IAM account. But before that, let me show you the code commit service itself. Just go to the search bar, search for code commit. What does it say? Store code in private Git repositories. The word private is very, very important here, because in terms of AWS code commit, there are no public repositories. And it makes sense, right? Because if you are using AWS account, like this is my AWS account, and definitely no one in the world will be able to access this AWS account unless they are part of my organization. So these repositories that you create inside AWS are not public. They are totally private. Whereas if you move to GitHub or if you move to GitLab, you can make your repositories public. You can make them accessible to everyone and anyone. Let's say within your organization, if you're using GitHub Enterprise, or if you're using GitLab enterprise version, or if you're downloading GitLab and if you're installing it, again you cannot create public repositories there, because that is very much in your organization only. And AWS code commit is a direct competitor to only them. They are not, like, AWS code commit is not a competitor to open source or public GitHub repository or open source gitlab.com. It is only competitor to the private repositories that people usually use in their organizations, right? So private word is very, very important here. Now, so it is very similar to any version control system. Like here you have options for creating a repository. If you have used github.com before, let me open github.com, right? So if you go to github.com, you have this one here. For example, go to the home page, and you will have option to create repository. If you click on the new button, you can create the repository. And once you create the repository, let me go to one of these repositories, my repositories, and you have a code. You can put code here. Then you have option for pull requests, you have option for issues. I've explained about github.com or version control systems in detail in my DevOps course, so you can follow that video. Similarly, AWS CodeCommit also has the same things. Firstly, you can create a repository here. Let's say that I'll create a repository to host my code or to store my code. So let's call this repository as a demo repo. Let me call this as demo repo CC, demo repository code commit. Okay, demo repo for learning code commit. Okay, and you don't have to enable this one. AWS provides something called as AWS Code Guru, but you don't have to use it. It is very specific to Java and Python applications only, and it does not give you a lot of added advantage. So you can ignore AWS Code Guru. You don't have to use it. Okay, now click on the create button. So your repository is created, and see here there is a warning sign saying that you don't use root, or root is not that much compatible. So like I told you, I'll switch my gears and use the IAM user, and I'll show you what permissions are required to be granted to the IAM user so that you can play with AWS code commit. So once you create this one, then definitely you have the clone URL here, and similar to github.com that we saw, you have option for pull request issues, right? You can do the same thing here as well. You can do pull requests, commits, branches, right? You can use the same features, but here you will have less features that we will compare, that we will learn in the disadvantages section. So let's start with basics. Firstly, you can use this clone URL, right? The clone URL is copied. You can take your terminal and you can clone this URL here, but I'll show you the steps, like how to install Git here on this terminal, and how to clone the repository, and how to upload the files. I will tell you, but you can also use the browser itself. Even from here, what you can do is you can go to your repository. This is my repository, right? Go to the repository and you can upload the file from the UI as well, right? If you scroll down, you have option for add file, upload file. I can go to my personal laptop from the upload category, and I can upload any file here. For example, let me upload a file. Let me call template.yaml that we have used in the last class. Should be there here somewhere, or I can use any file. Yeah, template.yaml here. So I can upload from here as well. Then you might ask me, then Abhishek, if I can do it from here, why should I install Git on my personal terminal? And why should I access this repository from my terminal or Visual Studio Code or someplace? It is required because from here you can only upload one file at once, or you can also edit only one file at once. Provide some details of the author here. Let me say my name is I am Veeramalla, and let me provide a random email address, uu@gmail.com, for example. I can commit files from here, and I can also edit files from here, but uploading files or editing files can only be done one by one if you are using the user interface. So if you want to upload multiple files, or if you want to edit multiple files as part of your Terraform scripts or as part of your code, then in such cases you will need Visual Studio Code, or you will need a terminal, right? So that's the reason why we will learn how to use the terminal, right? So you understood about the repository here, right? How to create the repository, how to upload the files, how to update the files. Just use the edit button from the UI, and then you have sections here which are very less options you have. One is for settings, branches, commits. These are all standard version control system options. But now we will learn how to use an IAM user, because even to clone the things onto your terminal, you cannot use root account, right? So of course, AWS is not recommending the root account at all. And even if you are trying to use the root account, you cannot implement SSH using root account for cloning. HTTPS can be done, but still it is not a secure option. It is not a good option. It's a secure option, but it's not a good option, and AWS does not recommend it. So that's why let's see how to create an IAM user and what permissions need to be granted. So what I'll do is I will go to the IAM service. Let me take this in a different tab. Okay, and here I will start creating with a user. There are 0 users, and whenever you are doing any demonstrations that I am doing, please try to delete them after the demo. In this case, you will not be charged. Whatever I'm using are free, but anyways, even if they are free, please try to delete them. So let me provide a username, code commit user. Provide AWS management console access. Yes, I want to create IAM user. Let me provide a custom password. I'm going little quick here because in day 2 I have explained IAM in detail. Custom password, I can give some password here. Then user must create password at the next sign in. It is not required. Click on the next button. And my IAM user is created for now. Either you can attach it to a group and add permissions, but in my case, I'll delete this user. This is just for the purpose of demo. So let me attach the policies directly. And the policy that is required is, watch carefully. If you search for code commit, you'll get power user, full access, read only. Go for the power user. Okay, with power user, you'll get all the access that are required for you to try the demonstrations, for you to enable CloudWatch integrations, SNS integrations, everything you will get through the code commit power user. Okay, so it's a good one with all the permissions. So click on the next button and now create user. Using this user only, we will be able to HTTPS onto the code commit and we can upload files. I'll show you from the terminal, and every action that you want to perform, do it through this IAM user only. Even in real-time organizations, people use IAM users only, right? So what I should do here now is I can copy this one because I would need account ID to log in into IAM user. So let me store that somewhere. And I know my username, I know my password. So let's take an incognito window, right? I hope I'm sharing the right screen. Perfect. I'm sharing the incognito window. Now go to AWS console and here click log back in. Perfect. Let me provide the no, I don't want root account. I want the IAM user, and here I can provide the account ID. So this is the account ID, and now I need to enter the IAM username. For that, I can say code commit user, and the password I can say whatever the password that I have put, right? Perfect. Now I have logged in as an IAM user. Very good. I have logged in. Now let's try to increase the font and access the repository that we have created. So this is the repository that I have created, right? Where is it? Uh, just give me a second. I think I am in a different region. Let's switch to the US East one. It happens sometimes. Make sure that you are in the right region. Go to the repositories. You know that in AWS, regions are very important because the resources that you have created, you will find in the specific regions only. So this is the repository, demo repo CC. Now I will show you how to access this repository from terminal. Firstly, what you need to do is you need to install Git on your personal laptop, right? So for that, go and search for Git download. So once you search for Git download, you will find this option called Git downloads. Open that Git downloads. You have option Mac OS, Windows, and Linux, right? So choose your category, choose your distribution, and install the one that is appropriate to your machine. And once you install, just search for git hyphen hyphen version, and it should give you output like this. Only then your Git installation is successful. Once it is successful, then you can go back and you can click on the clone URL. use HTTPS, clone HTTPS, right? If you just click on this one, it will get copied. You don't have to do anything. Okay. Now use the command called git clone. Why did we install git? Because we need to use such commands, right? So git clone, and once you click on the enter button, then it will ask you for the username and password. In my case, there is a reason why the forbidden or why the authentication is failing, because I have multiple other git credentials stored. And in your case, once you enter this one, it will ask you for providing the username and password. Once you provide the username and password, you will be able to clone this repository in your machine, right? So all that you need to do is go back and cd to this repository. So you should do cd demo repo -cc. Of course, I can do it, but I I just want to give you this as an assignment, that clone this repository using the credentials. And once you clone, you have to set your git config as well. That is, use git config --user.name. You will get this when you try to commit the files. You will see you need to set the git config --, username and also the email address. Don't worry, it's very simple. If you are not able to follow, you will see the errors on your screen as well. Just take this as an assignment, that using this IAM user, what you need to do is use git clone, right? The git clone command that I just showed you. You can get the HTTPS URL from here, clone the repository on your local machine, and try to upload some files onto this AWS code commit, right? You can create a file here. Once you clone the repository, use the cd command and move to this specific thing on your personal machine. And once you move, you can use the vim command, add some test file, then use the git commands like git add, then you can use git commit, right? Git commit -m, pass some message, and finally say git push, and you should be able to see that new files on this repository. Take that as an assignment. Okay, now this is about AWS code commit, all the things. Now let us take a look at the disadvantages. Disadvantages are very important. I'll tell you why. AWS code commit, I told you what problem it solves. It solves the problem of, right? It solves the problem of managed Git solution. If you are using GitLab or GitHub, I told you, in organization usually use private repositories, and mostly you use the managed Git solutions. You install the Git software on the servers. It can be GitLab or enterprise Git. So of course, AWS is solving this problem using code commit. But if you look at AWS code commit, it has very less features, right? What are the disadvantages? One is it has very less features. Today, if you go to GitHub or if you go to GitLab, you will find some amazing features like GitHub as GitHub Code Pilot, right? GitLab also has something called as Auto DevOps. GitHub is coming up with new integrations with Visual Studio Code. You can just go to github.com, click on the space bar or click on the dot button. Just click on the dot and it will open a Visual Studio Code online. You can edit the files there. So these are rich in features. Github.com or GitLab or any other things, they have advanced collaborations, integrations with a lot of tools, whereas AWS code commit is very restricted. If you are already using any other version control system, then you will face you'll find it very difficult to use the AWS code commit. So that's the reason why AWS code commit is very less used by organizations. Even organizations that are completely in AWS, they use something like GitLab or they use GitHub, and they use private repositories within github.com, or they even install their Git solutions on their servers. But like within github.com, you can create some private repositories as well. So that's why people don't use AWS code commit. And AWS code commit, again, it is very much restricted to AWS also, right? You must have seen that all the integrations are with AWS services only. You cannot integrate with multiple third-party solutions. So because of these reasons, organizations mostly used solutions outside AWS code commit. It can be GitHub, it can be GitLab, it can be AWS, it can be Bitbucket, it can be any other version control system, but AWS CodeCommit is very, very less used. And it has multiple other problems with integrations as well. And the user interface is also not that great. So that's the reason why when we deal with the next videos, where we will learn about code pipeline, we will learn about code build, we will learn about code deploy, we will not use code commit, because during your interviews, it is very important for you to pick up the right tools. Even if you are trying for AWS DevOps, GitHub or GitLab or Bitbucket will add a lot of value for you. Code commit does not add a lot of value. And in my course, I am mostly interested in giving knowledge to people that helps you, or that helps them in getting jobs, that helps them in talking to the interviewer in a more productive way. So that's why instead of using code commit, I have explained everything about code commit, but I will not use code commit. In the next class, when we use the code pipeline or code build or code deploy, I will use it with github.com, and I will show you the integrations with github.com, so that it will also help you a lot. For me, using code commit makes very, very simple. My life becomes very easy, because when I'm doing the demos, everything is within AWS, but I'll take that extra step and show you with github.com only, so that it helps you during your interviews. I hope you found today's video informative. Please try the assignment that I've given to you, and let me know in the comment section if you are able to implement the demonstration or not. Thank you so much for watching today's video. I'll see you all in the next one. Take care. Bye everyone.